Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Charlestown's Oral History Project. I'm Tom Coots, and this program is brought to you by the Charlestown Historical Society. For those of you who have been following us, you've seen that we've gone to the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, and tonight we're going to be doing the 70s. And last week, Billy Boyle sat down and they talked about women in Charlestown and their role. He sat with longtime friend Judy Evers, and that was really great to see the two of them sitting there. It seemed like they were sitting, two friends in their living room just having a chat, and that's what we want to do. This whole concept came to us many years ago with Jim Conway and Peter Looney, who said that we've got a lot of our well-known history recorded in books, but a lot of the local history, folklore, stories of Charlestown people, townies, have only been in oral form, passed down from generation to generation. And it would be great if someone could capture that. So sadly, Jim and Peter are no longer with us, but we wanted to do this in their memory. So Billy Boyle and I decided that we were going to, put metal to the pedal and get things done. And with the help of our great cameraman, Robbie Marcella, we're getting that done. So tonight we're talking about the 1970s with Lisa McGoff Collins. One of the things I learned in Charlestown is that you have to use everyone's maiden name in order to have people remember it.
Always.
So if I had just said Lisa McGoff, you'd know which Lisa McGoff this is.
That's where my mother talked.
She
would tell me her friends' maiden names, and I'd go, who? You know, Peggy Duato. And I go, you mean Peggy Cochran? Yes. Okay, Mom. Now I know.
I've been working here for over 20 years, and when I first started, Helen Pino was my assistant, and everyone referred to her as Helen Potter by her maiden name. And she referred to every woman by their maiden name, and she'd say to me, well, you know who that is? And I'm like, no, well, that's her maiden name. And I said, well, I didn't know her when she was a maiden.
Do you ever notice that when you talk to someone from Charlestown, you say, you know her, and then you'll say, no, I don't. You know her cousin. She comes in here probably every Thursday. She has the brother with the wooden leg or something. That's how we all talk.
It's like when you give directions. You always say, well, you go down to the such and such store and you take a left. The first thing I was told when I came to work here is be careful who you talk to and who you talk about because they're all related.
It's so true.
So we're going to talk to Lisa about the 1970s, and most of you have probably really bad memories of ugly hair and polyester outfits. But we want to talk about some of the things that happened in Charlestown during the 1970s. And probably the one thing that most people would think about is busing.
Yes.
And it was a major news story all over the country, not just local. I grew up in Revere, and I remember the nightly news, watching it and seeing everything that was going on. What was it like to actually live here when that was going on?
Well, a lot of people may know me already and know how involved our family was with busing. And there was a book written about our family, 3 families involved in busing by Tony Lucas, and it was called Common Ground. So it talks about from our ancestry all the way to the actual time that the buses came to Charlestown back in 1975. 76, I'm sorry, 76. So growing up in this community, I am a 3rd generation, my kids are 4th generation. They could even be 5th generation, I think, because my great-grandparents lived in the North End, which was part of Charlestown at the time, but really wasn't part of Charlestown. Anyway, whatever. So my mom went to Charlestown High, and we heard tons of stories about it. And she was the secretary of her class, and my Uncle Bobby was the president of his class, and we always heard great stories about Charlestown High. My brother Danny, God rest his soul, he graduated in 1975. He was the president of his senior class. We saw all kinds of fun stuff, and then busing came along. My brother Billy, class of 76, was kind of a tough year because from the time 74 and 75, his whole class was saving money, having fundraisers, doing all kinds of stuff so that they could go to England and celebrate the bicentennial.
Okay.
And when busing came along, everything was nixed. They could not go. No matter what they did, they could not go because, and I hate to say it, because the black kids were not invited to go because they didn't do the fundraising and they weren't part of it. And it turned into it was awful.
So there were a lot of protests that were going on, and there were organizations, that started in people's homes, and they got to be pretty big. And as I said, I remember watching it on the nightly news. But you had a number of organizations, and people were protesting throughout the...
Yeah, well, It started out that a whole bunch of mothers, my mother, Mrs. Supri, Mrs. Russell, Mrs. McGinnis, we all lived in the projects. We all have 6, 7, or 8 kids, and now our kids are going to be all over the place. Some got bused to Roxbury, some, some didn't, whatever, and they wanted to protest to let them know that we don't need to get on a bus to get an education. We can get an education right here. So they started the mothers group, which different than our mothers group now. It was, and they were a group of women, and they called themselves Mothers Against Forced Busing, and they had a group of men which called themselves the Powder Keg, and we would meet nightly. The kids would also get together too, and so that would be like me and Pat Russell's kids, and we'd all get together and would sit and talk about how we were going to stop the buses coming into Charlestown and what we were going to do to protest, to show them that we didn't like what was happening.
And this became such a big thing that they didn't just bring in local police, but they brought in the National Guard.
So I always tell people my very first day of going to 11th grade, me and my 2 friends, Jeannie and Joni Smith, we lived down in the projects on Decatur Street. We bought Coca-Cola pants from over the bridge at the Army-Navy store, and we had on the same shirts. And we walked up to Bunker Hill Street, and we got to the Red store, and there were men standing there with little lapels, with suits on with colors on their lapels, little dots. And they'd say, "Where are you going?" "We going to high school." "Can I see your papers?" Open the paper. "Oh, go ahead, walk up the street." We get to the top of Monument Street. "Can I see your papers?" "Yep." You look up, there's snipers on the roof of Charlestown High. There has to be 200 different TV stations from all over the country on the monument, pointing cameras at us. So we walk past there, and then we get to the corner, right, across the street from the high school, and somebody asks you again. So if you know that walk, it's about 180 steps, and you've been asked 3 times, do you belong to that
It's like
school?
living in a third world country where you have to... Now, one of the things that I did here, and for those of you know, I'm with the Charlestown Militia Company, which is a historical reenacting group only, but I've been told that back at that time, even members of the Charlestown Militia from 1975-76 were being questioned and investigated by the FBI and others because they were afraid they were a militant group going to do some harm.
Because a lot of those fathers they had kids in the school, and that was, and so they joined the Powder Keg, which was just like, we're ready to bust. We've had enough. That's all it was. But what they did do is, during the few hostile years, if some child or some parent or somebody got arrested, they were the ones that helped raise the money to bail them out of jail.
To get them out of trouble.
Because there was a lot of that. We had a lot of walkouts, a lot of sit-ins, a lot of
protests.
Tons. Yeah. So we get across the street, we go into the school, and now we have metal detectors. Why are we going to school with metal detectors? Yeah. So at the time I had an afro, because I had really curly hair, and I had a pick to do my hair, and they had to take it out of my bag.
A metal pick?
It wasn't metal, it was plastic.
Okay, just checking.
So, but that kind of stuff, you go in, you put your, the thing that they did, which they tried to do, was put in people that we knew in the community. So Bobby DePaul, Bobby Beckwith, people that played for the town.
Familiar faces.
Frankie Peral, people that, when he worked for, I forget the name of the organization. But they had them people in the building to make us feel safe. It didn't really matter because so
getting there was a whole
horror story, and then you get into your classroom, you sit, the doors are shut, and then you have policemen standing outside your door, looking in, watching every move you make. There was, and I always say, my junior year, I was absent 62 days, and I got 69 days or something, and I got promoted. And I was a rabble rouser. I was not a troublemaker. And I really wasn't a troublemaker, honestly, Robbie. Now, I wasn't a troublemaker. I was a protester. I didn't want to do this. So my brother
Freedom of speech.
My brother Billy went to school every single day because he played football, he played basketball, and I was really mad at him. Like, why are you doing this? We're fighting against this, and my mother said, it's up to him.
Yeah,
if he wants to go to school, it's his senior year, let him go. You want to protest and march, and you do what you want to do, but you can't ask him to do the same thing. We fought constantly. The junior year kids didn't really like the kids in our senior class because but they had already been working for 4 years to do all this stuff for the centennial.
And to have it taken away from them.
Was lousy. Yeah. Was lousy.
Speaking of the bicentennial coming up, 1976 was the 200th anniversary of America's birthday, but 1975 in Charlestown was probably just as big because it was the 200th anniversary of the Battle of Bunker Hill, which, as we all know, was really the first stage battle in the American Revolution, and without June 17th, there would be no July 4th, as they say here in Charlestown. As they always say, yes. So I've seen pictures. There were upwards of 10,000 people that were up at that monument. And, considering Charlestown is only 1 square mile, people were renting out their houses to TV stations and to newspapers, renting them spots on the roof to take, pictures and videos. What was it like with all that excitement going on during that time?
In 1975, I was a sophomore in high school. So I probably wasn't paying much attention. But I do remember going up and watching reenactments when I was a little kid.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming it was probably the same way. Yeah. We had so much going on prior to 1976 because Southie was involved in busing and we were watching them. And so it might have been something that I didn't pay too much attention to because my mindset was
after busing, it's sort of, anticlimactic with all the stuff going on.
It was,
but I'm told that during that time, every house had a Bunker Hill flag hanging, every building in the streets, all through the bicentennial.
Yeah. It probably was. I'm a little project kid.
And the thing is, just so you know, I've already discussed this with Lisa when she said she doesn't remember much about it. I said, did you do drugs? And she said, not one. So I just don't know.
I did not do that.
What about the the elevated rail that had been up since 1900? Now it comes down in the 70s.
Very noisy, right? And that's one of the big things you always remember, it was noisy. But it was the only way we could get around because my mother didn't drive. Or she couldn't afford a car at some point.
That was one of the things that 20 years ago when I first came here, a number of people and even men, heads of households said, "Oh, I don't drive. I don't need to because we have such great public transportation."
It was so easy to just walk to Thompson Square, go through the turnstile, sometimes jump it, and go to downtown Boston. You could go through Knott Station, you could go to Sullivan Square, hop a bus there. Transportation was a lot quicker and faster back then, I'll tell you. We used to be able to go to the Broadway Theater. My mother would let us go down, take it to Sullivan Square, walk down to the Broadway show with our quarter to get our ice cream. All the kids used to go and hang out down there. So life was easy back then. And I liked the L.
If you talk to Eddie Clutch Callahan,
the
Loopers, having all that, and I know that Loopers were long gone, but what was it like trying to drive
it's horrible.
Around when you have...
Worse than now. Because it was, there was not a lot of room and those big, tall things. It was not fun to do. But I didn't drive. My mother didn't drive. Yeah. So, we did everything.
I have people telling me that with all the movement back and forth, that there was metal dust everywhere. And people were continually, like soot, having to clean their windows on a daily basis. And once it was down, they said they saw sunlight for the first time in ages.
It was unbelievable. Yeah. What a difference. But it was sad to see it go.
And a lot of people, and I know a lot of people in Charlestown have pieces of the L, whether it's a bolt or a piece of metal. And
I have one hanging right in my living room. Was given to my mother, and then when she passed, I got to take it. That was one of the things I wanted.
Passed down to you.
Yeah, lucky me, right?
So nothing personal, but you got screwed by your mother, right? What was life as a teenager like in Charlestown in the 1970s? Now, we've got disco, so I'm sure there was a lot of ugly wardrobe choices with platforms and bell-bottoms.
Hey, listen, I wore Coca-Cola
pants. I was going to say, the Coca-Cola pants probably can't be beat.
Back in my day, it was the Army-Navy store over at the bridge. We were able to go over there and buy Army pants and just...
It was the same thing for me in Revere.
It was a surplus store.
Yeah, Army surplus
store. And that's where we used to buy our clothes. We'd go downtown to Learners or whatever, but... Because I came from a big family in the projects, I didn't get to shop much. So I got a lot of hand-me-downs. And mostly boys' clothes. So, but, I can remember my mother, I was a big turtleneck person. And I always wore turtlenecks.
Well, that was perfect. The 70s was the turtleneck era.
But you know what? Disco back then, we had a lot. My brother Kevin, my brother Danny, they were really into music back then.
I've seen Danny with some disco hair, John Travolta
Yeah, but
hair.
they were into music back then, and we only listened to, in our house, we only listened to black music, gospel music. We never really listened to disco. It wasn't my brother's thing, unless it was sung by the Temptations or somebody else.
Something that Dennis Taylor would be singing now.
Yes.
Now, when I was talking with Billy Boyle, he said in the 50s there were a lot of dances in town, in Charlestown. And, there was one dance for, teenagers up to a certain age, another one. So with the advent of disco and everything, were there still dances in the town that people went to?
I remember when I was a kid, we used to go to dances at the old Knights of Columbus on High Street. Mm-hmm. We used to dance there. That was one of our places to go. And the townies used to run it. It was all those guys that, the Bobby Beckwiths of the world, they used to run it for the kids in the community. Right. And then my hangout, as my mother used to say, everybody had a corner. Nobody has corners anymore, but back in the 50s, they had corners.
Right.
Her corner was where the old post office used to be. I can't even remember the name she used to call herself, but the old Lexi Gym, that's where she used to hang out. Because she came from Monument Ave, so she'd come up over the hill, and she was okay there. Well, we hung at the administration building, which we called the Mini.
The Mini building, okay.
And we would sit there. There was me and my friend Beth Burton, who I'm still good friends with. The Coloran sisters, Maureen Lynch, Judy Messenheimer. There was a whole bunch of us, and we used to sit on that Mini and sing 1950s songs until Father Mahoney, not Father Mahoney, Father Smith would yell out of the rectory window, "Girls, stop singing." But that's where we went to our dances, upstairs in the Mini. Boys on one side, girls on the other,
And that's what
same old, same old. And then St. Catherine's used to do it.
Yeah.
They would have dances. So, we had a lot of places to go.
So the one thing that I've heard from everyone that we've talked to through the generations is that Charlestown always was and still is a real family community. And I've heard stories from people after they've watched some of these videos and said, "Oh, I've got a story. I used to take my bike over to such and such, and someone called my father and said, was Joey supposed to be on this street?" And I'd get home and my father'd say, "Mr. So-and-so called, you were over there." There was, even in the 70s, there was still a lot of that, families looking out for other families.
So I hung out, like I said, at the administration building, and then when the Kent School was built, we started hanging at the Kent School. And I lived on Decatur Street, so my mom would say, as soon as those lights come on, let's go. Every girl I hung with, none of them lived in the projects. They all lived up on Tremont Street or Monument Ave or, Mount Vernon Street. None of them, I didn't hang with the kids in the projects, I hung over there. So my mother would always say, she would come across the street. I could see her coming. I'd say, "Gotta go." Run across the street because she had 7 kids. Yeah. They were all over the town. But I always hung at the Kent. So
you still do?
I still do. That's right. I would Kent Pride. So, and it would be one of those, "I know you're down there. I knew you were there. So-and-so saw you." I always tell this story. During busing, they had put like a, what do they call it? I lost my train of thought. That you couldn't go out after a curfew.
A curfew, yeah.
After a certain time. So my mom became really good friends with some of the policemen because she had so many children running around the community that they would drive by and say, "Get in. You're going home. Your mother wants you home. Get in." We couldn't get away with anything.
Right.
From the police to, and always eyes, which makes me sad because it's not like that anymore.
But also as a teenager, as a child, you were respectful of the police officers.
Oh,
you
definitely.
didn't give them the trouble.
Until busing.
Right.
Busing made us angry because of the way they treated us.
Right.
I mean, chasing my mother down the street on a horse and, taking kids like Billy Carter in an alley and beating him on his knees when they knew he was a great hockey player. Stuff that they did during those years made you anger at the police. But Mr. Soupy was a policeman, so, you had to respect him.
Right.
But it was really not the police from, like, say, was Station 15. It was mostly state troopers.
Right,
and
right.
We called them stormtroopers.
From outside.
Because they literally, Tom, you had to hear it, walking up Bunker Hill Street, side by side, banging their off
the batons,
cars.
yeah.
It was like you were in, so it made you mad.
It was like a war zone.
Like, what are you doing?
It was a real war zone.
I'm a 15-year-old kid. I'm just hanging on the corner.
Right.
It was awful. For those few years, it was a horrible scene.
And 40 years later, there's still a lot of people that are still very emotional, very passionate about what took place. It really had an everlasting effect on how things are today.
When I talk to my kids about busing, they go, "Get over it." And I always say to them, "I will never get over it."
You didn't live through it.
you don't know what it was like to go from a small community where everybody was go to the high school, you'd be with your friends,
Right.
you'd hang out with your friends, you got to go to Ma Ryan's and get a sandwich, you got to go to, my sophomore year, I used to go up to the Warren Prescott and read to the kindergarten kids. And I used to go over to Mass General and give out magazines and that kind of stuff. As soon as busing started, every single thing that you could do the year before, you could no longer do. For the safety of the black people, for the safety of yourself, because we always had people outside the school chanting and yelling all the time. And you only could go to a certain part of Concord Street. Like there was a tree, you couldn't pass that tree. And you only could go to a certain part of Monument Square. But you could hear people all the time. And then, you got policemen and you have undercover agents. It was not fun to go to school.
It was a tough time to grow up.
I became a senior in high school. I decided that, and I did this like one summer. I went to, because I was sort of a leader back in high school, they sent me to a program like it was, what do they call it? It was at BU where you climbed 60-foot ladders and oh my God, I can't think of the name of it.
Oh, like an outward bound.
Yes, thank you. Yes, it was an outward bound for little project kids that were troublemakers. Supposingly. I was not a troublemaker, but I was a leader. So kids listened to me back then.
Right.
I don't know why, it just happened that way. And it was so different, Tom. I met kids from all different parts of the state. Black kids, white kids, whatever. We became really good friends. We spent like 3 weeks just trusting each other and seeing what it's like. Because when you grow up in the projects and that's all you know.
Yeah.
It's all you know. There's 7 of us. My dad passed. There's my mother trying to raise the 7 of us by herself and making sure none of us get in trouble. So anyway, my junior year, after all that mess, and I marched on Washington 3 times. I was on TV. I sat with Kennedy. I sat with every mayor. I was interviewed by people from Norway. I was on Time magazine. It was crazy. And I said to my mom, that's it. I just want to go to school, have a prom. I just want to have a yearbook.
Just be a kid.
I just want to go to school.
Yeah.
She said, you do whatever you want, Lisa. That's your choice. And so there was a core group of us that decided this is going to be different this year. We're going to have our prom. We're going to do what every other senior kid in the entire country is doing besides what we did all last year. And you know what? It really worked out well. We had so much fun. And we had black kids joining on with us.
And now you educate young minds.
Yes.
You educate young minds.
I certainly do.
So it was great.
We're only about a year apart. And my mother was politically involved, so we all sort of became politically involved. But at one point, on Bunker Hill Street, where we lived, 82 Bunker, we had 4 or 5 different political signs on our house because nobody ever agreed. And my mother used to say...
So the whole family didn't agree politically.
No.
Now that's interesting because...
And my mother used to say, if there's anything you have, and that's an opinion, and nobody can take it away from you, it's yours to keep. So if you all have different opinions, it's okay, as long as we get along.
So Danny, you said Danny graduated in 75.
So he was the president of his senior class.
So Billy's 76.
Billy's 76. He was the vice president of his class. I graduated in 77.
So,
I was the
so
president
you're all like
of my
Irish
class.
twins.
Yes, my brother Kevin,
Irish triplets.
75. He was something in his class. And then Tommy was our rabble rouser. He went to Pope John. He didn't want to go to the high school.
So you all probably started voting at the same time and getting involved in politics.
Crazy.
Now,
and my brother Danny was very politically involved. Billy not so much, but Danny and I used to bat heads, and then I finally figured out Danny was always right. So I jumped board with him.
So it's funny. A number of years ago, and it was back, I remember when John McCain was running, so it must have been 2008. I went down with a group of people to at the Harvard Kent. The kids were going to be doing election ballots.
Oh, yeah.
And so one of the things that, when I was down there, I was collecting all the ballots, and I said, I started talking to the children. I said, so why did you vote the way you did? Well, my mommy or my daddy told me to do this. And a lot of children, as they grow up, they vote the way their parents have voted until they get older. But with you, it's...
To this day, though, once I decided that my brother Danny was right, because he could walk on water.
God rest his soul.
I'd say, who am I voting for, Dan? Oh, my God, what do I got? And now that he's passed, who am I voting for, Joe? Now I call Joe McGonagle, his partner, and say, Joe, who am I voting for now? Now I'm kind of... Because not that they're always right, but they were logical.
They have
back
logical.
then. Yes.
Yeah.
And they were the ones that you would say, this is who you should vote for, Lisa. I mean, you can vote for whoever you want, but this is who we're backing. So yeah, I like.
For those of you who don't know, when we started this tonight, Lisa said, I'm never going to be able to get through all these questions.
I got more if you want.
And she said, you may have to stop me. So actually, at this point, I'm looking at my watch. We're going to stop for now, and this has been a lot of fun. I've had a lot of fun. Thank you for coming, Lisa, and thank you for Robbie coming. And for those of you who don't know, it's absolutely pouring outside right now. So I do thank them for coming down. And we're going to be coming up with some other programs very soon. And now that we've gone through the decades, we're going to hit the 80s and the 90s, all the way up to modern time with some of the memories that people have. And then there are some other ones that people have talked about, such as firefighters and police officers in Charlestown, the military who have been involved, veterans in Charlestown. So we're going to be bringing you some more programs as time allows. But if you have any ideas on topics that you would like us to talk to people about and to interview, let us know. You can get in touch with us through Facebook, through our Facebook page, or get in touch with Robbie or me around town, and we'd be glad to listen to what you have to say. But as for now, as always, I'm yours, Charlestown. Have a good night.
Kind of funny.
Speaking of politics, look who just showed up.
Hi, Douglas.
The man that called himself at one time the Kingmaker. Doug, come on in and sit down.
First of all, I've never called myself the king.
Listen.
Second of all, I'm quarantined.
The self-proclaimed king. All right, so we'll leave Dougie down. We'll leave Dougie down there. Turn the camera on so they see that Doug.
I gotta see this before I do it.
Doug is here.
Come on.
You know, so listen. So Doug, Lisa,
I apologize for being late.
Lisa and I talked about the 1970s.
Wait, can I just say this?
Yeah.
Doug used to babysit me when I was a kid.
Okay.
He lived next door.
So, that was one of the things that I wanted to talk about, is that when we're talking the 1970s, we were going to talk about how, Lisa only remembers the late 1970s into the 80s because she's so much younger than you. But,
so what?
So we talked a little bit about busing.
Which was an amazing time.
Which Lisa gave you a lot of great insight, and then we talked about the L coming down. But for some reason, Lisa remembers nothing about the tall ships or the bicentennial. And I know that when it comes to the bicentennial, you were very industrious, and you created a little business with your brother selling T-shirts.
Well, my brother George had decided that we were going to sell T-shirts, and so he came up with this. There was on the Boston Globe, there was a picture of the tall ships on the back. So he's like, you know what? We're going to print this on these shirts, and we got these beautiful beige shirts and with the beautiful blue sails, the whole Boston Globe thing. And then we said, you know what, let's go over to the Boston Commons and check it out and see beforehand. And they were like hotcakes. People had pink and green and blue and this beautiful sort of Bostonian colors, beige with this blue. And he's telling everybody he drew the design. So it was beautiful. So everyone thinks they're getting this sort of artist thing, and we had 1,000 and we had more fun. We met, there was 6 million people, whatever. It was crazy. And they kept moving us around. And we had permits, but then we couldn't use the permits. So we just moved from section to section. Then I'm over in Faneuil Hall, and he's over in the waterfront, and some guy comes by and says, "You got a twin brother?" And I'm like, "Why?" He's like, "You need to go over." And he said, "They're over there hustling T-shirts." He's over there on a beach chair. He's got women selling T-shirts. Georgie was over there. Oh yeah, the whole. So anyway,
so you might have been industrious, but George was the entrepreneur. He knew how to work it.
But we sold, and every night we'd go to the push cart afterwards, and we would come home, and then we would do it the next day. We had a ball. It was fabulous. It was a great time.
So do you remember anything about the bicentennial in Charlestown, the 200th of the Battle of Bunker Hill, or anything going on?
Really?
I don't know why.
Did you?
What about the tall ships when they came to Charlestown?
I do remember the tall ships in Charlestown.
The only thing I remember is Joanne
that.
Doherty was getting married. Joanne Sindora was getting married to Michael Doherty, 2 Charlestown families.
Yeah.
And they were getting married. I believe it was downtown, like Park Plaza or something. And to get all the people in their trolleys out of Charlestown to her wedding was almost a disaster.
Too funny.
It was like a horrible nightmare because there was just so much traffic. And to get her from the church at St. Francis all the way over to Park Plaza, wherever she got married, people were late. But, I mean, in the end, it all worked out. But that's all I can remember. I can't remember anything else.
It's funny, going back to when you're talking about busing in the 70s. So I graduated in 73. And actually, I didn't graduate from Charlestown High. I ended up over at Boston High. I had a little bit of trouble in the school, so they sent me over there. they had this work-study program where you would go to work for 4 hours and then you would go to school.
Oh, I remember that, yeah.
Yeah, Boston High. As a matter of fact, they asked me to come back and speak. They wanted me to come and speak one time.
That was what they did with the troubled kids.
Yeah, the troubled kids. But so the busing starts, and sort of I'm leading the charge. And if you look at the Green Square Mile, there's a whole thing on with the guy with the helmet.
Yes.
With the red. That's me. So I'm leading the charge, and we're fighting with the police and the craziness. And so Lisa was still in school dealing with all, and she's got an amazing story and how she dealt with all that in her family, and the book Common Ground. But we were sort of the outside troublemakers and causing all the grit. Because they used to march, remember, at night? They'd be banging the things. It was an ugly
That's exactly what she was saying.
It was an ugly time,
It was like being in a war zone.
I said before busing, we respected the police.
Yeah.
And as soon as busing came, 360.
I mean, on the rooftops with guns.
Yeah.
I mean, it was an ugly.
Chasing
people don't
with
realize.
Buses. I said the worst thing they ever did was beat Billy Carter's knees.
Yeah.
That kid was
and you know the sad part about that whole thing? It had nothing to do with black and white. Lisa would tell you. It had to do with my little sister having to go across the city, or
telling people where their kids.
My mother used to say, "Why are we taking a bunch of poor white kids and moving them over to Roxbury and taking the poor black kids and moving them over to Charlestown to give them the same education with the same?"
As I used to say, they should have bused the teachers.
Yeah, it would have been a lot easier.
But as far as the 70s, I know you guys talking about the 70s. For me, remembering, in this town, the way it was, every corner had a hockey team. You know what I mean? A street hockey team. In Eden Street, when you go down there at nighttime, there'd be 200 people down there watching.
Kids
we were the Munchkins, by the way.
Well, think about it. The 1970s leading up to the Olympics.
Yeah.
And the Miracle on Ice.
Yeah, Jackie O'Callaghan.
Jackie O'Callaghan.
Yeah. But back then the kids didn't get in trouble for hanging on the corners. That's what your parents wanted you, so that somebody could keep an eye on you.
Interesting. I heard a story today talking about Jackie O'Callaghan in the Olympics, that when they were trying out Jackie Hughes, who played for Malden Catholic, got cut. But Jackie O'Callaghan got hurt like a couple of days before, and then they were thinking about bringing Jackie Hughes back, and then he signed a contract with, I forget who it was, one of the NHL teams, and he was gone. And then, so that could have been a whole different story. You know what I mean? So, that was a great time. I remember everyone going up on his street, and
when he
welcoming him home.
Yeah, that was good.
Well, one of the things that I'm glad to hear that you're talking about, Lisa was speaking about it, and other people have, is that Charlestown then, as well as Charlestown now, has always been a family community.
Yes.
People looking out for each other.
Yeah.
One of the stories Lisa was talking about was, sitting on the steps and one of the priests telling them time to go home, and when it got to be a certain point, some of the police would say, your parents are looking for you. It's time to go home.
People always looked out. We always knew. You weren't afraid to walk around. You just it was so different.
And my brothers used to fix the windows for my sister Judy. We go way back, but they lived underneath us on
So Judy and her kids.
Yeah.
Judy and Doug and his family, they lived at 66 Decatur. We lived at 74.
Yeah.
So we're on the first floor.
She had the clothesline.
She had the clothesline. But my mom had to work at night because my dad had passed.
Yeah.
So Sheila would mind us, and then
Judy
would mind us, and then it was down to Stevie and Dougie.
Yeah.
And my mother would trust them.
It's amazing.
and Dougie would bring his friends.
You turned out as well as you did.
Dougie would bring his friends into our house, and they would be playing cards. Nikki Salvi and crew playing cards.
That's right.
And then my mother would be coming home to be jumping out the bathroom windows and the bedroom windows because. But you know what? It was all good. It was all good.
Yeah.
It was. They would never do anything to hurt us. Yeah. They made sure we ate. They made sure,
That's funny.
But you know what? And that's what family was then. Everybody did for everybody. Everybody in that neighborhood, we watched out. I always tell this story to people. My dad would come home from work. He worked for Boston Parks, and he also was a bartender. And my mom always had a pool out with all the kids, and she'd have peanut butter and jelly and Kool-Aid.
Always had the hose out there.
Always had the hose
Always had the hose,
And one day and one day my dad comes home and he's like, Alice, this one's been out in the sun too long. Because we had a new neighbor who was black who moved in. and he just walked in the house and that's just...
But everyone was together and looking out for each other.
We did everything together. It was nice. We had big families. All grown
all
up.
Families in them, Kellys,
I could name that whole building.
The Englishes, remember the Englishes? Remember the Talents? The Talents upstairs.
The Talents had done the second floor, the Lords on the third floor.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to let them continue talking, and
Sorry,
and we'll no keep going, and we'll see you on the next episode. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.